Heather, welcome to the Political Hope podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. How exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I first of all, before we even get started, I have to acknowledge you. Thank you so much for how you show up. I have to super acknowledge you're probably one of the few politicians. I don't even think you're a politician. You're like a scientist, a mother, a friend. You're so many other things, much more amazing things than a politician. But how you listen to people and how you engage with people and how you also, when people are saying something, the kindness and the compassion, the way that you address people. Like people don't do that, in especially in like council, city council, county council kind of spaces. People usually neglect the concerns of citizens, but you always address people. So I just want to acknowledge you for acknowledging others so beautifully.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'll actually talk a little bit about being a politician. In our country, the word politician has become a bad word. But, I really look at the act of politics of what you're just describing. It means going out there, listening to the community, trying to pick up ideas and and working towards solutions in such a way that everybody feels respected and their voices are heard. And I always find that the most benefit comes from that sort of collaborative approach. So I take pride in being called a politician because I think politicians can do important work as long as you come from the mindset that everyone is operating at some level from a place of goodness, right? That they're trying to make the world a better place, and they may disagree with you about how to achieve certain things,
Mhm.
but if you genuinely believe in your heart that they're coming from a place of good intention, I think it's much easier to work together and collaborate.
Yeah, that's beautifully said because I feel a lot of times when people are have been a politician for a long time or they're kind of in the circles of politicians, they stop listening to the current concerns. They're just like everybody's going to have concerns. It doesn't matter, you know? And it's important to acknowledge what you just said, that actually people their concerns are in the interest of something good, you know?
Mhm, mhm.
So that's beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question I ask all of my guests, which is a great way to frame these conversation. What does political hope mean to you?
Political hope means having a fundamental basis of optimism and believing that you can make a difference and that um, hard work and attention to detail and communicating with people and working towards collaboration can genuinely make the world a better place. And that's what I tell people. I am fundamentally a cockeyed optimist. I believe all things are possible. It just maybe takes a little bit of elbow grease and hard work and making the right connections. A lot of times that's been what I've found is that it's bringing the right people together for the conversation. And I am actually tremendously optimistic in the times we're in right now. I know that what's put out on the popular news media is often very negative. The world's coming to the end. There's all
Mhm,
this
mhm.
negativity. And people got to recognize that that's clickbait. They're trying to get you to read the story. But at the broader level, there's actually so much good stuff happening. I mean, in this last year, there was more investment in renewable energy than there was fossil fuel energy. That
Wow.
and in within 3 years, or sorry, now 2 years, they expect that renewable energy will actually overtake energy produced by fossil fuels. You
Wow.
have the program where in India they planted over a
Mhm.
million trees in 1 year. There's so many fabulous things that are happening that good news doesn't sell advertisements. And I think it's important to go out there and spend some time saying, what good things have happened in this last year? And so, reflecting on that gives me a tremendous sense of hope about the times that we're in right now and the possibilities that are out there. A lot of the work I do, I interact with the next generation, the youth of our community. And oh my gosh, these guys are so awesome. They're involved in all these different programs. They're active in the political sphere. They
Mhm.
want to be engaged. They want to contribute. And if there's anything that gives me hope, it's that. It's that seeing that this next generation um, also has a sense of political hope that they can make a difference in the world.
Yeah, it almost feels like sometimes, in my engagements with younger folks, and when I even tune into the younger energy inside of me too, I recognize that, sometimes you have to acknowledge the problem. You have to acknowledge the shadows, and then you do something about it. But if you just pretend like, no, it's not, that's not my problem, that's something separate from me, you don't actually take the steps and the actions towards it. And the younger generations are taking steps. I mean, it's pretty phenomenal. Especially on this island, I felt I can't tell you how many young people on the Big Island have reached out to me like on their own accord to be like, how do we volunteer? Like, how can we do something to help? And it's like, whoa, I didn't even ask those questions when I was their age, you know?
Yeah, yeah, no, I'm seeing that too, and it's pretty exciting to see the willingness to be involved and to step up for their community. And just this idea of, yes, absolutely, you have to acknowledge the problems that are out there, but you can acknowledge them as opportunities, right? These are places that improvements can be made, and I think just that little tweak in mindset of
Right.
saying this is not an unsurmountable problem, but this is an opportunity for us to do things differently, can really reframe the way that you approach things.
Okay, so I want to. I mean, obviously, you see what I have behind me, and I have this quote from Ben Franklin, which you said in one of the interviews for this. I think it was this article about the proposing thing, and I was like, "What? That's awesome!" Because
Mhm.
because that quote it's really important to acknowledge that actually, what if we're more preventative about situations and not reactive? And maybe can you speak to that? Like, why did you choose that, and why did that resonate with you?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of different reasons. One is that um, just at the very basic economic level, there have been several analyses done and compiled that indicate when we spend time on preventative measures and resilience measures, particularly with respect to the impacts of climate change, that the cost benefit ratio is 6 to 1, which means we're getting 6 times the value if we're spending the money up front on preventative and resilience measures to the amount of money that we're going to spend recovering from an event when we haven't prepared. And so, that was kind of the pragmatic view of it. But we are, I always like to say Hawaii is not for wimps, right? Because we have hurricanes and tsunamis and
Everything.
earthquakes and floods,
Volcanoes.
volcanoes, and yeah, there's no shortage of things. That's one of the things I love about Hawaii is you're reminded who's in charge, and it's not us.
I love
And
that.
but because we are so, and I don't want to use the word vulnerable, but because we have so many of these sort of emergency type situations that are just part of the environment here, it really behooves us to be prepared at all different levels, whether it's the government and our ability to respond and react, but also at the community level and ensuring that our neighbors are connected with each other. Everybody knows who can cook the big pot of chili to
Mhm.
feed everybody. If the bridge goes down, who's got the D9 if we need to go do some excavating. So that's what I want to see going forward, is this multi-level investment, both from the county in terms of infrastructure and then the communities in terms of building relationships to ensure that if something does happen, nobody's isolated, nobody's unconnected with some sort of resource that they might need in that particular scenario.
And that's a really great segue to this proposition that you and another one of the councilwomen have kind of spearheaded. Can you speak to this, and what's the hope in this, and how does that address what you're just sharing right now, is creating that multi-level engagement?
Yeah, yeah, it is a good segue, and that wasn't even on purpose. Um,
Nice.
don't you love it when those things come together?
Love this.
Yeah, so Councilmember Villegas and I have introduced Bill 48, which proposes the Office of Sustainability, Climate Equity, and Resilience, which is Oscar, is the nickname for it.
Nice.
Yeah, it rolls off the tongue. Anyway, the purpose of Oscar, well, let me actually step back. That Oscar has been in evolution for a long time. As you mentioned before, my background is actually as a scientist. I worked in the climate science field. After being in the academic sector, I started a policy advising nonprofit or a consulting firm to help basically communicate issues around climate change. And
Wait,
so,
wait, hold on. I have to acknowledge you for something.
yeah.
When I was like researching you, I was like, whoa, wait, hold on. My mom did something very similar. You
Mhm.
studied molecular biology in college, right? Michigan. Okay, so you're a Wolverine. But then for years you didn't. I don't know what you were doing with that career. But then in 2014, you went and got a master's in conservational biology. So you were molecular biology in at Michigan. So I just want to acknowledge that you went back and started back with a beginner's mind to help the community. I mean, that's just so awesome. So I just want to acknowledge you for going back to school at a totally later time than when you went to school. So thank you for doing that.
Well, that's I'll just say, generally speaking, not to go too far down that sidebar, but I've reinvented myself a number of times, and now I'm in my political iteration, and how lucky are we that we have those opportunities to do that and really follow our passions and our dreams. But with my background, part of the reason that I wanted to run for political office was, we know a lot of the steps that we need to take to address climate change and to build resilience and to build sustainability. We have plans in this county that are excellent plans that if they were enacted, we would actually make a significant amount of headway.
We would be we would be a lighthouse for other communities all around the country,
Absolutely. Around the country, around the globe. And the fact that we're an island community actually presents some like we're a unique case study in that sense, but it's actually very much transportable to any other community. Like I don't think that the things that we can achieve here only apply to island communities. I think they're very broadly applicable. But where the frustration came in was that, okay, we know what we need to do. Why aren't we doing it? What are the barriers? Why do we seem to be stutter stepping or taking contradictory actions that don't all support the same agenda? And so over the course of the last couple of years, that's been the diagnosis. Okay, what have been the barriers to implementation? And we've been talking with the private sector, nonprofit groups, the various departments within the county, other counties, other jurisdictions outside of the state, trying to get a sense, okay, what really needs to happen? And through the course of those conversations, it really came down to, okay, there's so much going on. It's part of it is scientific, part of it is political, part of it is communication. And there really needs to be a centralized coordinating authority that can manage all of these different components. And so I started looking around at different models of how you do that. Like how do you successfully create lasting and impactful change? And through a conversation with a local nonprofit, they brought up the collective impact model. So I started researching, okay, what is the collective impact model and what does it entail? And the collective impact model, it has 5 legs to it. It's that you have all of your stakeholders, they share a common agenda. So a common set of objectives, desired outcomes, and whatnot. Based on that common agenda, maybe you can Google collective impact model and find an image there. Based on that common agenda, there's a shared set of metrics. So you are all measuring your progress and success in the same way. You ensure that the activities that you're engaged in, maybe that one there, the 5 conditions of collective impact, because it describes them there. So you have the mutually reinforcing activities. So you remember what I was saying before about we often take contradictory actions because we're not thinking through the full life cycle of things, right? Totally. And then you have this constant and open communication between all stakeholders. And then this is all supported by a fundamental backbone organization that provides the administrative support. Fantastic. And so based on what we had identified through our diagnosis process as the barriers to implementation, we looked at this model as a way to, okay, address the primary concerns, which were making sure that the community and folks internally were educated, that our activities were coordinated, that people had the technical support that they needed to make good decisions, that there were resources, financial resources available through the grant funding, various grant funding opportunities. And so we overlaid our the collective impact model over our overall vision for this office.
Nice.
And yeah, I'm pretty stoked about it. It's going to be, I'm actually presenting this to a group that I work with in DC in a couple of weeks, just because it's going to be so novel. Like, I'm really excited about the organization of it. And
Heather, by the way, like as you were describing it, for me, like contextualizing it in like a spiritual way, not spiritual any religious particular way, but just like the interconnectedness of everything. I see this model as being kind of like stewardship. Like it's like stewarding these resources and collection of contacts and grants and money. Like there needs to be stewardship, like legitimate stewardship, and stewardship has a spiritual role, so this is a great model for that stewardship.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's totally the concept, is that there's this shepherding, the stewarding happening for all of these efforts that we agree as a community are important. And so that's what the office will do. We'll start with 5 people, and the people are actually organized also around the collective impact model. So you have the administrator, right, that is the backbone, the coordinating person. You would have a community outreach specialist. You would have a data visualization and analysis specialist. That's your shared metrics piece. And then you would have two folks that are dedicated to one to policy development, and one to the grant managing and providing technical support to the partners, the stakeholders. And so that those two kind of working together have to do with the mutually reinforcing activities piece.
And none of those people are Chat GPT, right?
No, all those are going to be real life people. And one of the things that I'm super excited about is there's already so much interest in this office. I have people that are like, okay, I'm ready to apply. As soon as you get this started, I'm ready to apply. And there's also, a part of the reason for introducing this now is the unprecedented amount of federal funding that is available through the Inflation Reduction Act to support climate action and building sustainability and resilience. And for me, one of the things that our director of research and development, Doug Adams, he talks about these as unicorn funds. And I genuinely think they are, in the sense that I don't think we will see again in our lifetime this sort of investment in climate change and resilience.
This is like the New Deal situation with FDR, which like completely changed. The middle class went like boom, But this is for climate. This is like different. We're like doing this in relationship with nature. It feels like an opportunity for us to be in relationship with nature.
Yeah. No, I think it's a once in a lifetime opportunity, and that's why I've been so pushing this to happen now, because those funds are starting to become available through the various competitive grant projects. And one of the things that I like about what's been put forth in the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, is that there's this Justice 40 initiative tied to it. And the Justice 40 initiative suggests that 40% of these funds for any of these programs be dedicated towards people that are have been traditionally marginalized. And what I really appreciate is that the federal government has recognized that we have not always been equitable in our response to environmental issues. Yeah, mind blowing. Yeah. And so, we have Justice 40, what are identified as Justice 40 communities on our island, in our county. And I'm really just super excited. And that's why equity is in the title of this office. It's sustainability, climate, equity, and resilience, because we want to ensure that the impacts of climate change affect everybody equally, and the benefits from the programs are distributed in an equitable way as well, because traditionally that has not happened. You have seen communities with respect to environmental justice being treated very, very differently.
Big time.
And so bringing some of that back in line is is an important part of these federal programs right now. And I also wanted to highlight that in our community, and make equity, not just a side thought, but part of like the actual mission of this office.
It's interesting too. Like I'm grateful that you're bringing that into the space. I mean, I come from a community in India that were persecuted, and so my parents had to escape India because people there was a genocide, a mini genocide that was happening, and we come from a community of farmers, right? And there was a really bad like farming practices that were brought in by the Rockefellers, and Monsanto was a part of that, and it really ruined a big portion of it. But it was based on science, right? And it was based on this thing like, oh, we're going to feed everybody, but actually the long-term effects of it are, farmers are still committing suicide, right, in India. And so we have this like important moment right now where we need to lean into this generational trauma, especially here in Hawaii, that people have been experiencing, and they're kind of like jaded and cynical by government, combined with like hopeless about everything, and like there's like this terrible mix of bad emotions, so I think that's kind of, I don't know, I'm curious if you could share or like comment on how we can collectively, and even you, right, personally and collectively, how can we address that hopelessness, that distrust of government? Because as you do this too, we really need the community to come in and be like, this is what our community is. Also, we're open to ideas for our community too, because that's also scary, right? Because sometimes the ideas can hurt the community.
Yeah, no, I think so a couple things, just in general, my feelings about our ability as society, as humanity, to address climate change. I feel like there's potential for innovation. I have every faith that we will come up with solutions and address the issues. However, if we don't make equity a piece of that, some people, the people who have always suffered more, will suffer more, right? And so we want to ensure that the benefits and the challenges are equitably distributed. Now, to your larger question about how to build trust, how to build to build faith, I think it just like goes back to what you learned in kindergarten, right? It's always be true to your word and just do what you say you're gonna do. And I've always appreciated the 4 agreements, and I'm not going to remember them off the top of my head right now, but you're familiar with the 4 agreements. Always do your best, be impeccable with your word, and I'm not going to remember
know thyself.
Know thyself, yeah. And so when I was elected, being somebody that is Caucasian and that is not from here originally, I've been here 20 years, but I wasn't born and raised here. There are people out there in the community that didn't trust me initially, and what I can say is that I've always done my best. I'm not one of those folks that says, oh, that's not my issue, go talk to somebody at the state. I've always tried to help, or at least direct in the right direction. If people tell me this is something in confidence, I don't share it. I keep it confident. If I say I'm going to do something, I do it. And as time has gone on here, I feel like I have earned that trust. And that's one of the things that I really appreciate, and a bit of the education that I have received from this place is that we are not a transactional community. Relationships are not transactional. They are over the long term, and are you have to take the time to develop them, right? They just don't happen overnight. And I've come to learn that and be respectful of that and be patient for that. And I think it's important to understand that trust is not going to be rebuilt overnight. Faith in government is not going to be rebuilt overnight. And we just need to keep staying true to those core values of just being impeccable with your word, doing what you say you're going to do, follow through, and keep working hard. So
yeah, and I say know thyself because the other 2 were like, I don't like the negative framing of them, right? So I said know thyself, right? And the other one is to to do what you say you're going to do, like to be impeccable, like what you said. Wait, did we say all four? Oh my gosh, people out there can correct us.
I'm sure chat will have all the list, but
oh yeah, oh my gosh, yeah, totally. So I have two comments on what you shared. Earlier you shared something about us supporting and being equitable and making sure we're bringing people into the space who have not been economically distreated or like mistreated, right, for generations, and even this coming around. I mean, I'm looking at, like, for example, Deanna, my partner, she is a nurse and she can't afford to live on this island. So at this point, like a registered nurse who has 8 years experience, John Hopkins trained, can't afford to live on that island. So our equitable issue is not even just about people who we think are inequitable, right? We're experiencing across the board at this moment. But the other side of it, at least I know I've seen this with my family, I've seen this studying cultures and communities around the world. Some of the greatest inventions in humanity have come from people from poor communities, from communities that had to be resourceful. The invention comes from the resourcefulness. And we kind of need to start flipping how we invest in communities, because we always give money to the people who have a lot of privilege. And we give them a lot of money. And can you invent something? And it's like, then you were like, what happened to the money? You didn't invent anything. What if we start giving it to the people who are being resourceful right now for their communities?
Yeah.
That would be a game changer.
No, and I love that, because just to clarify for everybody, that the first bill, the Bill 48, just creates the office and establishes the general mission. But there's a follow-up bill to this that fleshes out a whole new chapter of the code. And when we pull in the equity piece, a large component of that is ensuring that we have that broad engagement, because we want those ideas to be coming from the communities that we're trying to serve and support, rather than trying to dictate. And so a big piece of this is trying to make sure that our outreach and the communication pathways are open and available to everyone that wants to contribute to this overall solution. And I think you're absolutely right that in human history, it has been from adversity that we've often seen the greatest step forward. And I think there is a lot to be learned from what our communities are doing already that can be scaled at a larger level to help address more broadly the issues across the island.
Totally. And then you get to the exponential, synergistic, all the other things that, when something picks up and people are like, wait, this makes sense. This makes sense. This is common sense. This is common sense. Even the tourists who will be coming to this island will be like, hey, wait, we should do that where we're from.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the things I want to highlight about this office is it's not meant to be just internal to the county. It is supposed to be also helping to coordinate with the various nonprofits that are working in these sectors, and the public companies that are working in these sectors, as well as the community. And it's a big task. Like, I don't want to make it this is a lot for 5 people to do, but I am very hopeful that with the right people in place, and some of the momentum that we already have, that there's potential to do great things.
Yeah, and we're the place that I'm in, because I'm a part of a technology cooperative, and so we're a bunch of engineers, like computer engineers, civil engineers, all kinds of different engineers, and we like there's the doom and doom of AI, but actually, like, if we come from a human-centered place of developing algorithms and equations, and this, you're a scientist, if you do it from a human-centered place, these things can be great tools for this office. If we can integrate a great tool that creates clarity and dissemination of information that's accessible and digestible by farmers and by equitable for everybody in the community, that would be incredible, and that would leverage a lot of their time, so they're not spending it trying to communicate so much stuff. But we can use AI in that way too, right? It doesn't have to be a destructive force.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a tremendous potential for AI to, I've actually used ChatGPT a few times to write articles. I have to write an article every month, and hardest, the most difficult thing I have to do is it's on the Hamakua Times, is to stare at a blank page and come up with, an article from nothing. And so I've asked GPT, write an article about this for me, and it'll give me an outline, and then I go in and I give it my own flair, but it helps me with staring at a blank page. So, in that sense of in terms of providing that kickstart, if you will, for our own further innovation, I think that there's potential for that.
Sure. Yeah, thank you for bringing, I'm going to share this with my colleagues because this is kind of a cool diagram to kind of share, like, hey, how can we support this with some sort of technology, right? That can also be supportive. Okay, so on the other thing that you brought up is building trust in the community and creating those things. So I'm curious, like, you came to the gathering that we organized in Hakalau around the farming communities, and a bunch of different people in the community came. A lot of those people who came have never voted, or like they just completely distrust the government. But they were super engaged. They were sharing ideas. How did that feel for you as somebody who's been in the space? You've been in kind of the more colonial, patriarchal kind of systems. How did that feel in terms of building trust? Is that something we could build on? I went to one in Kohala that was kind of similar, but like it seems that we kind of need more gathering spaces where we're meeting in person in nature and coming from that place, and not so much the city hall space.
Yeah, absolutely. There's rooms for all sorts of different approaches. And I would say that nobody should ever think that the government is going to be the solution to all of the challenges that we potentially face, even as a person in government. I'm very conscious when I'm working in this role of what my limited jurisdiction and tool set is. I mean, there's a former council member from Kauai who's now a state representative, Luke Evslin, who basically nailed it on the head. We have two tools in our toolbox: land use and property taxes, right? And so I think it's important to be cognizant of that in our various roles, about what tools you have and what your scope is, and understanding that that's not going to cover everything. And so I love that there are these other arrangements and organizations and focuses and conversations that are happening. My hope is that they can all, at least at some level, weave together and can be, there can be these sort of cross-fertilization of ideas. And, I'm a longtime canoe paddler. I love paddling. And one of the lessons you learn in the canoe is based on what seat you're sitting in the canoe. You have a certain role, right? Obviously, if you're the steersman, you're the driver. You're making sure the boat is going in the right direction. If you're the stroker at the front, you are there to make sure that you're setting a pace that everybody can follow, that's appropriate to keep the whole speed up, and you're using the glide and all that stuff. And then number two is that I won't go through each seat, but everybody has a specific role to play based on what
they're like archetypes.
Exactly. And I've been both a paddler and a coach, and one of the things I always loved about coaching is just being able to watch people and see how they interact with others and say, okay, that's somebody that belongs in this seat. This is somebody that belongs in that seat because of their inherent abilities and traits, and then help grow them into those seats. And so if I take that metaphor from the canoe to our community, it's one of the things I love to do is look for these folks that are working in these various sub areas and say, okay, how can I support them? How can I grow that capacity? And there's space for all of us in working on these issues.
Yeah, and it almost feels, I just had a meeting this morning with some of the Rotary, because I just I'm starting this year as chair of the Eco Club. It's the first Eco Club on this island that we're launching in the Rotary, and one of the things I shared today that I've noticed while being on this island is everyone's willingness to lean in. Like there's almost like, hey, we're in this together. And it's even if there's a little bit more space where people might disagree with each other, but they'll give each other time to collaborate or figure stuff out. And I haven't noticed that, in California or Arizona or New York or Florida, but I'm like, here, wow, I feel like we can do something here, right, Heather?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I think that is a little bit of that island mentality, that sense that we're all in this together. We live or die together, but that's also the canoe mentality, right? You can not get along on the beach, but when you're in that boat and you've got 10 miles to paddle, you're going to work together. And that's, that's the same thing here is we don't have to all be best friends or get along or, share the same um interests outside of this, but if we have a common shared agenda, which is getting to the end of that race or getting to a point where we're more sustainable, that's when we come together and bring our different skill sets to make it happen.
Yeah, you're not going to knock that person off the canoe. You're like, who's going to take up that?
No.
Take that position?
Nope. 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 And you, one of the things that, again, to use the paddling metaphor, which it gets used a lot in politics, but I feel like I've been a paddler long enough that I'm allowed to, is, when you're in the canoe, if you're paddling, if you're beating to your own drummer, if you're paddling your own way, you are working harder than you will if you're paddling in sync with everybody else. And so that's a really important concept to me, is that there is strength and unity, and that
Definitely.
is the importance of establishing this common agenda for both the county but then the community at large, is that if we can agree on that North Star that we're paddling towards together, then we are stronger because we are
Yeah.
working the same
To-
objective.
Totally. Okay, so I'm gonna. It's not like it's more of like a Hawaiian lightning round. Because the lightning keeps coming. But kind of a lightning round, cute, like a series of questions, really quick about envisioning and imagining the future of this island from your standpoint. And yes, be realistic. The invitation to be realistic, but the invitation also is to lean into imagination and hope. And like we shared earlier, is that what if we can collectively be more optimistic? What can happen, right? If there's a collective shift towards getting things done, and this office starts doing amazing work. So just a lightning round based around that, okay? Where do you envision the in the next 5 years, 5 to 10 years, where are we in the farming industry, agriculture? What do you feel is happening in the most hopeful sense?
Right. In the most hopeful sense, I'm hoping that we are growing a larger amount of food products that will be used and consumed in our community, that folks are engaged in farming practices that are regenerative from the standpoint of they're protecting our soil, they're conserving carbon, they're minimizing the need to use petrochemicals, we've learned to value those sorts of activities. So one of the things that I think is important is to not just value the commodities that come out of agriculture, but the practices that can be actually used to support better land conservation. I'm hoping we're protecting our biodiversity in our agricultural products, and looking at food forests and other mechanisms to make sure that we're going to protect the biodiversity, the very unique biodiversity that we have in this community. Hoping ultimately that we have that balance of food security with protection of our natural resources, and the ability to be sustainable, to keep regenerating and keep providing for our community.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, even as you were explaining that, I also see like some healthier configurations of education, like, regenerative agriculture, natural farming, indigenous farming, like some educational model that's maybe not all on the Hawaii University. Because I feel like maybe that's one of the problems. We keep relying on that university to take care of everything, but there's so many needs,
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, next lightning. All right, here's the next one. The next one is waste and recycling. Like what do you envision the most hopeful scenario for that?
Yeah, well, recycling is always the last choice, right? It's reduce, reuse, recycle, and it's in that order for a reason, right? So the first thing is to reduce the amount of waste that we produce, and we've really become a consumer culture from the standpoint of you need something, you buy it, you use it, it doesn't work anymore, you throw it away. And an island community is the perfect place to be like, hey, wait a minute. That doesn't make a ton of sense. So, I've supported a lot of the different efforts out there to ensure that we can actually reduce the waste that comes into the island. Definitely interested in extended producer responsibility. So the people that are bringing in packaging waste or other material that doesn't need to come in actually bear some responsibility for the management of that.
Thanks.
I think that the burden of dealing with waste has been shifted inappropriately to us as the community from the people that are actually producing it. So I'd like to see that move forward. Again, if you can't reduce, then you need to find ways to reuse, and looking at reusable containers from fast food restaurants and the grocery stores and things like that. Going back to what we used to do at food co-ops and things like, I remember going with my mom to go, take all our jars to get peanut butter and honey and all that from the food co-op. That was one of my favorite things to do because I always got a few like carob chips. And then of course we get to the recycling piece, and I think it's really important for us to look at recycling from the whole life cycle and understand we are in the middle of the Pacific. So if we're going to be recycling, we have to be cognizant of where we're shipping it to, what the carbon footprint is going to be to ship that, and where it's going, and what type, we actually sending it to communities that are thinking about the environmental justice piece, communities where they have unfair treatment of workers and things like that. As much as we could actually bring back that recycling locally, keep it small scale and distributed, I think that's our best option. But again, we got to start at reduce.
Totally.
And we won't have to do too much in the recycle.
That's awesome. And what about what do you feel about waste? Like, where can we go in that space?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of well, I love the idea of again, just switching the mindset from waste to resource, right? And thinking about these things that we have traditionally considered as waste as potential upstream inputs to other economic engines and economic pieces. So if there are, obviously supporting all of the efforts to create mulch and to do composting and all of that with our green waste and our food waste. When it comes to other materials, looking at those being inputs to other economic drivers or other uses, I think is something that I'm hopeful that we will get to at some point on this island. Yeah.
I saw a documentary about a DeLorean that takes garbage, so maybe we can
That was a documentary. Oh, I didn't realize
that. Okay, that's that. Okay, what about how do you feel about healthcare? Like, where do you feel that can go? What's the most hopeful space for that?
Well, I think healthcare, again, this is all tying into that first quote that you put on there, prevention, an ounce of prevention, pound of cure. When we think about healthcare, the first part is keeping people healthy, right? Making sure that they have the access to healthy food, that they have access to exercise, mental health, all of those things, and community. The studies have been out there, and there was a great talk on this about they interviewed a bunch of centenarians, people that had lived to 100 years older or older. And they focused on, okay, what were the determinants that led to that longevity? And you would think, at the top of the list would be like not smoking, not being overweight, things like that. No, what was at the top of the list? Having connections, having community, having relationships, right?
Wow.
And so, ensuring that that's part of making sure that people stay healthy, is making sure that they have those connections and relationships, and more data about the impacts of that on health is coming out. So again, with respect to healthcare, first piece is keeping people healthy, and we're fortunate to live in an environment where you can be outside, you can be interacting with nature all the time, and I think that's really important.
So we're just having more gatherings, more potlucks, more canoeing.
Exactly. That's you're absolutely. I think it's really important to keeping people healthy. As far as when we do have to provide medical care, our challenges there are mostly around the shortage of medical professionals. And you mentioned that your partner is a nurse and having difficulty finding housing here. We have issues with doctors as well. So, from, again, thinking of the toolbox that I have, I think what we really need to look at is the housing piece and making sure that we have the housing to support the society that we need, right? That I think is a shift in perspective from the traditional capitalist model. Is just buy and sell, is what you can pay and what you can afford. We really need to construct the foundation, the society, the land use, the infrastructure to support the society that we want to have, and we need healthcare professionals as part of that society. So
yeah. It makes me also like, Matt, we are in a really interesting space on this island that there is still a very healthy and vibrant indigenous culture, right? Whereas a lot of places they've been deleted or completely marginalized, or they don't even remember anymore their indigeneity, but it still exists, like the La'au, Lapa'au, and there's traditional healers. And here, I study Ayurveda. There's so many Ayurvedic plants growing here. And so I'm like, wait, I think there might be some connections there with the Hawaiian traditions and Ayurvedic and Chinese medicine. And so why can't we construct something that is just like a healthy forest or a healthy garden or a healthy farm needs incredible diversity to be resilient? What if we created a healthcare system that had that kind of diversity of practitioners?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. I mean, you're a meditator, right? You meditate.
Paddling is my meditation.
That's a meditation.
And, we have our own. We all have our own ways, but mine is out there in the canoe, and that's because when you're paddling and you're focusing on being in sync with everybody, that's all you can think about. And there's always a wonderful perspective that comes from looking at the island from out in the ocean, right? It's very different from being here and looking out. Totally. It's humbling and it's grounding to be out there. So that's my meditation.
I feel that that's good to acknowledge, because one of the things I've noticed in my forays and my own amateur social science research in going into political and government spaces is the lack of meditation. And it doesn't matter what kind of meditation, the lack of meditation by so many politicians and so many staff members in political space and government spaces. So thank you for doing something where you're taking care of your body and your mind, because it is a lot of work and you're like managing a lot of space and there's a lot of things spinning and things don't always go the right way. But if you have some sort of practice that grounds you and balances you, that allows you to show up better. So thank you for leading that charge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's get the other folks to do that more. Let's get more meditation. Doesn't matter what kind of meditation. Just come on, please meditate more. Okay, so that's that. What about education? Like, what do you see? What's the most hopeful configuration for education on this island in the next 5 years?
Yeah, my parents were both teachers, so I have a tremendous amount of respect for people that work in education. And I think that I have kids. I have 4 kids that have all gone through Hawaii schools, and from the lens that I'm looking at things right now, I hope that there's more civic engagement and civic education happening in our educational system. I think that just like in healthcare, there's a need for diversity of experiences. I think we're learning from the times that we're in right now that the traditional path of, you go through high school, and if you're lucky, you get a degree, and then you find a job and you work in that job for the rest of your life. That is not necessarily the right path. I think, we talked a little bit before about how AI might benefit humanity. And I think one of the places that it will benefit folks is we're going to have to think about work in a whole different way. I mean, I think you and I grew up with the understanding that, okay, you got your education, you worked, and you tried to contribute to society and all of that stuff, and work was kind of a central and a core part of who we were as individuals. I don't think that's going to be the way it is going forward, and so our educational system has to have that flexibility to match whatever is going to be that new sort of social environment that comes from as technology as it influences how the world works. So my kids, I have one left in high school, and one that just recently graduated, and then they're still trying to figure it out. And I feel less and less able to give them advice about how to prepare, because I think that there's so much uncertainty. But
Yeah.
it's an uncertainty that I don't find daunting or unpleasant. It's an uncertainty of just excitement of like what's gonna be next. And what I'm hopeful about is that people will be more able to focus on their passions and maybe not make work and labor the central part of their existence,
So,
as
okay.
so many of us do.
I remember when I was in medical school, we used to show off on how many hours we'd worked and not slept. Like that was like, that's how we showed off. And that was like,
Yeah,
that's terrible. Like looking back, I'm like, wait, that's a sign like you're going to have so many issues with your cognition and your issues. That's not what you want doctors to be doing, is not
right,
sleeping.
right. Yeah, no, I think that that's been the mentality, right, for a long time, is work yourself to the bone. That's
Mhm.
how you show your worth. And I actually really appreciate the millennials saying, I'm going to work my 40 hours and that's it. And I'm not going to make my career my life. And I'm starting to see more and more the benefits of the 32-hour work week, where they're trying that out in various European
Mhm.
countries and stuff like that. I think that that's going to be where we are in the future, is that work and labor is a reduced part of our overall existence. And I think
Sure.
that's a good
Sure. Do we want more time being used or more efficiency? I mean, we have to decide.
thing.
Efficiency doesn't need. Some people can do something, and if they're efficient and they understand how to be efficient, they could do something that might take 10 hours in a couple hours. But okay. On the other side of that too, really quick, I want to comment because I remember hearing somewhere that two of your daughters have moved off island. Two of
Mhm,
them are here, right? And we don't know if they're going to stay or not. But that's a big
mhm,
problem. I volunteer with Ryla, so I work with youth that came from all around the island and got to hang out with like 50 youth, and that was their concern. They like we don't see a future here on this island, like staying
mhm,
here, like career wise, interest wise, anything wise. Like
mhm,
how do you imagine how do you like from your vantage point, how
mhm.
can we support youth to stay here? Like what would encourage them to stay here?
Yeah, well, one of the key words I think you said there is the vision, right? Is there a way that they see themselves staying here and doing meaningful work or contributing in a meaningful way that's going to provide them with some satisfaction, and also with the economics
Mhm.
to be able to afford the home, or do whatever they need to do to be able to stay here. And I think I've had this conversation a number of times. There is a tremendous amount of inertia that we need to contradict. Um, many of the structures in this state and on this island are actually set up to promote that the division of us into
Mhm.
the have-a-lots and the have-nothing at alls, right?
Totally,
And
totally.
very little for right there in the middle. And that's by design, right? That comes from the structure that was set up under the plantation days,
Mhm.
which was
Totally.
elites and workers, right? And
Mhm.
the 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 efforts to contradict that inertia are going to take a while, but it's possible. And that's there's a lot of things that I think when we, for example, like land speculation, that's something that is driving up home prices. Well, why does land speculation happen? Because people can get property in Hawaii, sit on it, do nothing with it for decades, and make tons of money off of it when they finally decide to sell it.
Yeah.
That that is enabled by deep structural processes within the county and within the state. And so, some of the things that I've been trying to do from a policy standpoint is look at those deep structural things and try to slowly move the needle so that we are not just promoting what has always happened.
Yeah, and the challenge is to like not fall victim to incrementalism, which then everything's changed so much in like 30 years, and then it was like pointless.
Mhm.
And then I won't I'll just cough eminent domain, but I didn't say anything. You didn't hear anything. So okay, that wow, I think you hit the lightning rounds great, and it was cool. Nothing, all the trees and everything are safe. So thanks for leaning into that. And then The last question I want to pose to you is kind of like more of a reflection, because you come from a really beautiful place and you have been an advocate for people to vote more. And I've noticed the voting numbers voting locally all across the country is atrocious. Like, and then young people voting locally is even more atrocious, right? It's all like landowners and wealth and older folks, right, that are voting everywhere. What is your encouragement for people to get more civically engaged? And however you feel that's, but what's your encouragement? And you have young kids too, and I mean you're basically they're young adults. So what is your encouragement to the youth and younger generations to vote and be involved?
Yeah, thank you. I think that it is important for folks to recognize that it matters. It absolutely matters that you go out and you vote and participate in the political process. The re-election rate for incumbents in Hawaii is 98%. And yet people grumble and grumble about our politicians and oh, it's the same old, same old. Well, yeah, it is the same old if you don't go out there and educate yourself about the candidates and actually participate in that elective process. The other thing that I would say is you don't have to also be passive in that process. You can absolutely participate as, maybe start out as participating on a campaign, figuring out how the process all works, then becoming somebody's campaign manager, then running yourself. Like, there is tremendous value to be gained from just participating in that process as a candidate, even if you're not elected. And, one of the things I ran 3 times before I was elected. I won on the 3rd time. And
That's amazing.
yeah, it's just like pushing the rock up the hill here. But it every time I learned a little bit, I gained more insight into my community. And it's, as a scientist coming in and I'm a learn by doing type person, it's an incredible way to participate in your community. And so I encourage folks to, speak with with candidates if they're not, ready to run themselves, and learn a little bit about that process. That's a great way to be more directly involved. But there's a lot of negativity. We started the conversation about this, about the what a politician means, and that being a bad word. And for me, politics is the art of civic engagement, of understanding how to formulate policy and build consensus about it. And it's an important skill set that we need intelligent and heartfelt participation. And I think that folks have really, just because of all the negativity that surrounds politics in the United States right now, have just been they've just gotten so disappointed with the process and just disenfranchised, and we can't let that happen. One of the stories that I heard recently was about, if we have a shift, because the job as a public official has become so much harder, because a certain person who I don't need to actually mention by name has changed the whole landscape of what's appropriate in terms of how you speak to a politician and the kinds of things that you say about each other. It has become harder, I will say that. And if we let that take over, then the people that are coming from the right heart are not going to want to run anymore, because they're just not going to want to put up the stress of it. So, part of it is also being responsible in our own ways about how we engage with elected officials and how we participate in the government, and ensuring that folks that, like I said, come from a place of goodness are actually still willing to seek and serve in public office.
I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate you using the word heartfelt in that, and us enabling and supporting heartfelt people, because that is, if we're coming from the mind, I mean, we can do a lot from the mind, and brain power is great, and I'm all for it, right? But when we come from the heart, it's more of a place of connection and not a place of separation. We could compartmentalize and segregate in our mind, but in our heart, we're coming together, in that way. So Thank you. Awesome. So do you feel complete? Anything else you want to share? Or do you feel good?
I feel really good. I want to make sure that I just put in the plug for the next hearing on the Oscar bill. Bill
Yeah.
48 is going to be, the next hearing will be June 21st. We held it over earlier this week in committee for one more hearing so that we could make a couple of clarifying amendments. So hopefully folks can come out and support and testify. If you do written testimony, it'll be due the day before on June 20th by noon. But yeah, the next hearing on at 9 a.m. on the 21st of this month.
And you could be physical or it'll be physical and online, right?
That's right, right. People can testify via Zoom or send in a letter or testify in person. We'll be in the Kona chambers for that particular hearing.
And one more question on regards to that. Is this bill and this office, is this completely unique across the country?
No, I mean it is and it isn't. So there are other, in fact, City and County of Honolulu has an Office of Sustainability, and that's actually where we started, was from the bill that created theirs, and then we went a very different way with this collective impact model. There is also an office in Maui, although that has been kind of, I wouldn't say disbanded, but it's not been funded at the same level because it's formulated in a different way. There's some other great models out there that we've looked at in terms of developing the language for this bill. But what does make it this unique is that basis in the collective impact model, and really focusing less on the technical aspect and more on how do we implement based on collecting this coordinated effort, bringing everybody, all the stakeholders together in a coordinated way.
I'm glad you articulated that, because I also feel, I wonder if this would be helpful for people all across the country who might be listening to this podcast. Maybe it might be something to learn from if they want to watch the video later or want to attend, and this could be something, a model that they can replicate in their communities potentially.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Yay. Awesome. Thank you, Heather. Appreciate your time and energy. Thank you. Hopefully you'll come back.
Yeah, this has been great. Thank you for giving me a platform to share some ideas out there. Appreciate it.
Thank you.